Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm so glad you're here. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, the founder of Bare Bones Yoga. On the show, I help yoga teachers make sense of the parts of teaching that often feel harder than expected, especially around anatomy and how to apply it to your cues and your sequences, and how to truly feel confident when you're teaching your classes. Here, you'll learn easy, practical ways to understand anatomy using my step-by-step blueprint and how to apply it directly to your cues and sequences so teaching feels clearer and more grounded, so you feel present and more confident. We'll also talk honestly about the inner side of teaching, things like self-doubt, growth, and what actually helps you feel confident over time. You can find daily videos and additional support over on my Instagram and my TikTok channels. On both those platforms, I'm at Bare Bones Yoga. All right, let's get into today's episode. Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, and this is episode 392. I'm recording this on February 19th, 2026, and this will go live on Monday, February 23rd. And if you're listening to this close to real time, the Olympics are on. And I just watched the US women's Olympic hockey team win gold. And what an amazing win in overtime, no less. Women playing hockey, so inspirational, just absolutely unbelievable. And there's no shortage of amazing stories in the Olympics. Even when I talked last week about Lindsey Vonn and her injury, but even in the face of a devastating injury, how she represented strength and courage and such a strong and powerful mindset. And there are so many themes around having a strong, confident mindset in the Olympics this go around. Yesterday, Michaela Schifrin won, I believe it's the women's downhill, or not downhill, the women's slalom. And if you know anything about her story, you know that she's won the most World Cups, but the past run through the Olympics, she didn't win anything in 6 events. But the Olympics prior to that, she won medals. So she really had a monkey on her back to shake off by winning a medal. And she did. She won gold yesterday. And so there was so much around the mindset of an athlete that she shared in her post-race interviews. And it's just on my mind because this episode here is about mindset. And if you've been following along and you've listened to the prior 3 episodes, you know that this is a 4-part podcast series focused on what does it really take to be a confident yoga teacher. And in the first episode, we talked about cueing. In the second episode, we talked about sequencing. In last week's episode, we talked about understanding movement, which is anatomy. And then today we have this final component, which I'm talking about now in the context of the Olympics, but which is highly relevant for us as yoga teachers, which is having a confident mindset. And what does that really look like to yoga teachers? Now, I want to start out with kind of a premise or like a hypothesis. Remember when you were in school and you were in science class and they talked to you about a hypothesis? And this isn't really exactly a hypothesis because this has been borne out to me in all the, most recent years, I would say 5 years or so of coaching yoga teachers in my program. So if it started out as a hypothesis, I've come to learn that it is a truth by repeated attempts or repeated experiences in speaking to and coaching yoga teachers. And so it may have started out as a theory or a hypothesis, but it's been proven, at least in my mind and in my experiences of working with teachers in my program. And that is that there is something triggering about teaching yoga. And when I say triggering, I mean it in the way that you think. I mean, when you hear that something is triggering, it means that it brings up certain feelings in you. And what I have found is a very common experience is that teaching yoga triggers certain feelings about one's self in relationship to other or in relation to other people, and often is triggering feelings that a teacher has about themselves on an identity level. And I have countless examples of this. And it's not the kind of thing that I set out with as a hypothesis. It's the kind of thing that over the years of working with teachers, it just was a theme that kept coming up in lots of individual ways. And so at the beginning of 2025, I sat back and took a look at sort of the landscape of everyone I had worked with and said, what's the common theme? And this is what I found, that there's something about the I want to say the opportunity. There's something about the act or the experience. Let's say that. There's something about the experience of walking in a room, mostly people you don't know, to teach a practice that's been around for thousands of years, that has a spiritual side to it, that has a somatic side to it, that has an anatomical aspect to it, that is asking you to balance all those things in addition to showing up authentically and doing it in a way that balances what the people in your class might be thinking about you, might be wanting at the literal level of the sequence and the cues with what you want to do and how you want to show up. And so all of this creates this tension that results many times in yoga teachers having things come to the surface. That's what I mean about triggering. It triggers feelings of limiting belief, feelings of lack of confidence, feelings of, I don't know that I can do this. And the reason I'm sharing it to you in this way is because I want you to see it from that 10,000-foot view. And that can sometimes allow you to zoom out away from your own personal experience and see that, you know what, this is something that's part of the experience of teaching yoga. It's not something about me personally that I can't do it. And this is one of the things that so many yoga teachers come to me with, this feeling that I'm just not cut out to be a teacher. And that always breaks my heart because number one, you are cut out to be a yoga teacher. It's just that no one's having this particular conversation with you. And for most yoga teachers, they don't get any conversation, any support, any coaching around the mindset component because most hours-based teacher trainings don't talk about this kind of stuff. And it is baked in to what the yoga teacher experience includes. It includes this experience of walking in the room and engaging with this thousands of year old practice and doing it in a way that either is free and full of joy and full of non-attachment, or some variation of a way where there's attachment and worry and fear and imposter syndrome and I need permission to teach the way I want to teach and I'm not good enough and I don't think my students are liking my class enough or whatever it is. Right? So I want to talk to you a little bit about, in more detail about what that looks like, because a lot of times I get emails from people saying, I listened to your podcast and what you're saying really resonates with me. And so I really want to get into this a little bit more so that you can see if this is another one of those things that resonates with you, because if it does, that is more than a sign. That is the universe saying to you, oh my, now you've uncovered what really is the block. And once you uncover what really is the block and solve the block, the reason for the block, now you're unstoppable. So I wanted to um, tell you a couple of just quick examples, just quick stories about teachers I've worked with and how this all has played out for them. And everybody's literal story is going to be a little bit different. But again, I want you to keep in mind this broader context that we're having these things come up in, which is the teaching of yoga and how I described it to you. What exactly it is that we are being asked to do or what we are signing up to do. And it's kind of like a soup. All those variables that I described are combining to sort of trigger people, right? So I can remember I worked with a teacher once who had tremendous anxiety when she would go into the room to teach. And she described to me the physical sensations, the somatic sensations she had, and it was blocking her from really wanting to teach, even though on some level she knew she wanted to teach. And there was a lot of joy she got from her own practice, and she wanted to share that with her students. But her experience of teaching was filled with doubt, hesitation, questioning herself, and also that real visceral feeling of anxiety when she would walk into the room. And in the one on one work that we did together in my coaching program, she uncovered a connection to something in her life, namely that she had grown up changing schools a lot. And so she had developed as a young kid this anxiety around being the new kid in school. And she had a very visceral memory of all these times she would walk into a new classroom and every kid would look at her like she's the new kid. And until we had worked together, she didn't actually make the connection between the anxiety she was feeling now as an adult, a mom, a person who had a corporate job, and that little kid in her. And this is a really common thing. Whatever somebody might feel or experience as a child that's unpleasant, that causes them to doubt themselves or causes them to create a certain identity type, oftentimes teaching yoga will bring that up again. Again, this is why I say it can be triggering. I remember also I was working with a yoga teacher, and she was really shy and really quiet. And, I could tell from the way she carried herself. And when we would have our coaching calls on Zoom, how she sounded and everything about her said, I'm very meek, I'm very quiet, I'm very shy. But she really wanted to be, she really wanted to teach. And she was teaching, but it wasn't in her own eyes going very well. And it's kind of interesting because when you think about somebody like that, you wouldn't think that they would go into teaching yoga, because teaching yoga requires you use your voice, you stand up in front of people in the room, but she really wanted to do it. And in our one-on-one coaching calls, she sort of softly, I don't want to say admitted, she sort of softly shared with me in a soft, quiet voice that her husband called her a wallflower. Like this was his moniker for her. Oh, you're such a wallflower. And so she had taken that identity to heart. And despite that identity that was imposed upon her, but she felt on some level it was a match for who she was, she still took a 200-hour teacher training and she still started to teach. But now teaching, she was bumping up against this identity that in part maybe had been created even before she got married, but certainly was reinforced by her husband. And now she was bumping up against, that tension between this is the identity I have, and yet this is what I'm doing. And it's requiring me, it's asking of me that I step out of that identity. And I don't know how to do that. And that's the kind of, tension that can either be healthy tension, meaning it promotes change, or can be debilitating tension, meaning it further amplifies the limiting belief or limiting identity that one has about oneself, and they quit teaching. So those were two examples that I wanted to bring up. Another aspect of mindset is generated from this spiritual courting that exists between you and your students, you and the people who come to your classes. And by spiritual courting, imagine, of course, literally an umbilical cord, and the baby is dependent on the mother for nutrition and survival. And when you go in to teach your class, if you have this sort of I don't want to say imaginary, kind of not perceived. What's the word I'm thinking of? Well, you have this imagined cord between you and your students. what that shows up like is I don't really have a strong, confident mindset. Instead, what I have is this sort of dependent relationship between me and the people who come to my class. And the way that shows up is I walk into class and I hope they like it. I walk into class and I hope they think I'm expert enough. I walk into class and I worry that they don't think I'm expert enough. I walk into class and I teach my class, and afterwards I hope they tell me they liked it, or I wonder if they liked it. I walk into class and I feel worried that they're going to get hurt. So, all of these fears and concerns come from this imaginary cord that you have between you and your students instead of, well, and the other thing, the other aspect I want to just point out is one of the ways that this spiritual courting shows up is when you're worried that people are going to get hurt in your class. That worry comes from this idea that you are connected to them in an unhealthy, dependent way. And you're actually taking on responsibility that's not for you to take on. This gets into a sidebar conversation about what is your responsibility when it comes to injuries in class. And I'll just give you the short version, which is to say you're not really responsible because you are working with limited to no information about the medical history of your students. So you can't really control if they get hurt or not. So there is no cord. But there are things on your plate within your purview of what you have responsibility for. Do you understand anatomy? Are you providing clear cues? Are you walking around the room and watching them? Do you know your sequence well enough that you can teach it by walking around and without practicing with your students? All those things are your responsibility. And by accepting those as your responsibility, meaning these are things that I can control, you in addition release the things you can't control, like worrying if they're going to get hurt, because you appreciate that at the ground level, you don't know anything about them. So how can it be up to you to prevent them from getting hurt? Unless there are these extreme edge cases like let's do handstand or let's do headstands without, you know, appropriate positioning of the base of the pose, or just something that would be so clearly wrong, which I know you won't do. But this whole conversation flies in the face what flies in the face of what so many yoga teachers believe, which is it's up to me. It's up to me to prevent them from getting hurt. And that is in part what creates the spiritual courting, which prevents the teacher from feeling confident, because now I'm taking on the responsibility for everybody's medical problem, for everybody in my class, for all the beginners I see that don't know what they're doing. Now I'm burdening myself with that responsibility, hence the spiritual cord. The other way that this comes up is when you connect how you feel to how they feel. This is another example of that spiritual courting. This idea that, oh, I got good feedback after class. A lot of times the teacher will say to me when I ask, how are your classes going? Well, I'm not really sure how they're going, but you know what? The people I teach are leaving class and saying they liked it. And you can always tell the person's sort of doubtful that that's even helpful because their voice goes up. You see how I said it? Like, I'm not really sure. I'm feeling super confident, but you know what? When I taught my sister the other day, she said she really liked it. Do you hear in my voice the questioning? Because the teacher that says things like that to me, I know in her heart, she knows that that's not meeting the bill. She knows in her heart that that's not going to answer the question, which is how do I feel? Why am I so worried about what they feel? Why am I putting so much stock into what my students feel instead of how I feel? And the reason for that, and if this resonates with you, you're not alone, because guess what? 99.9% of the yoga industry messaging is 100% directed towards you need to worry about your students. You need to be thinking about your students. What do your students want? How are your students feeling? Are you giving enough modifications? On and on and on. No one's saying, well, let's stop for a second and ask the teacher, how do you feel? How are you feeling about this sequence you showed up to teach? How are you feeling about the cues you're sharing? How are you feeling in your body? What's coming up for you as you're teaching? And my premise to you is we've got it all backwards. I mean, not me, because this is not a premise that I'm holding out. It's what the industry's holding out. I am holding out to you a totally different premise where you are not going in to teach feeling a dependency, a hyper dependency, a hyper connection to how your students feel. Instead, you're going into the room and you're seeing the people in the room as totally in charge of how they feel. They can perceive me however they want. That's not something I can control. I can't even control if they like my class. I'm going into the room to teach yoga because I love teaching yoga. And I love knowing my sequence well, helping people move on the mat, sharing anatomy-based cues, helping them tap into the somatics of the posture. That's what I can control. That's what I love to do. And I do that, feel great doing it, and leave. I go home and go to bed. I don't worry, and now I'm talking about myself, but I'm doing this as an example for you. I don't worry about did they like it. I don't ask anybody for feedback. Anybody's feedback to me about the class they just took, I just consider that to be like their perception. Whether I had something to do with it or not is out of my control. So I'm being sort of, I don't want to say hyperbolic, but I'm speaking now in terms of like how I feel to give you an example of what's possible for you. And I want you to see how freeing that is because now you have cut that cord. Now you have what I call a healthy unattachment. I'm sorry, a healthy detachment. You don't have an energetic cord. You don't have a spiritual cord between you and your students. You have a healthy detachment. A healthy detachment means I walk in the room, or you walk in the room, and you see your students as whole and complete and capable. You don't see them as injured. You don't see them as beginners. You don't see them as judging you. You walk in the room and you kind of see them neutrally. These are people in this class. And you see yourself as, I know what I'm doing. I am qualified. I am expert. I mean, let's just be clear. I know more about yoga than these people. I mean, not to put it in those stark terms, but a lot of times teachers will say to me, I feel like my students, I'm not qualified to teach. Well, you went to training. They did not go to training. So most of the time when you go in to teach your classes, you're going to know more about yoga than the people in your class. And even if you have teachers in your class, or even if you have people who've been practicing yoga for a really long time, practicing yoga and teaching yoga are two different things. So I'm just sort of being hyperbolic here to make the point because I want to sort of wake you up from this sort of woe is me perception. I'm not good enough. I'm not confident enough. I feel triggered when I go in and teach my classes. And the reason I want to wake you up from that is because it's not your fault that you feel that way. And I'm so frustrated and quite frankly, pissed off that the yoga industry continues to leave this vacuum around this really important component of being a good yoga teacher, being a confident yoga teacher. But I can't change the industry. I can only focus on what I can do. Hence the whole theme here of control what you can control, which is why a big part of the work I do with yoga teachers in my program, the accelerator program, the one-on-one blueprint program, is around one-on-one coaching. Because in that container of one-on-one coaching, teachers thrive. They thrive in a way they do in no other type of program because all the other stuff is group. So I wanted to share that aspect of connecting how you feel with how they feel. So this whole idea of you independent of them is central to building a confident mindset. And I know it sounds paradoxical because most of the messaging you get is you are not independent of them. You are going into your class to teach students and you are dependent on what do they like, what do they want. I mean, think of the yoga teachers who go in and say, "What do you want to do today?" It's like, I don't know, lady, why don't you just teach what you came prepared to teach? Why are you asking me? And even if students say what they want to do, what is that teacher supposed to do? Now she's back on her heels. She's got to come up with a sequence in the heat of the moment. And all right, so maybe it's not a literal question. Maybe you're just trying to be nice, but let's be intentional about what we're doing. There are a lot of other ways we can quote unquote be nice that doesn't involve walking in the room and saying, "Hey, let's have a free for all here. What do you guys want to do today?" So it's you independent of them. It's teaching what you love. It's noticing how you feel after class. And this whole idea of how you feel after class versus getting feedback, the other aspect of teacher training, which drills this whole concept of feedback into your head, is because you probably got tons of feedback when you were in teacher training. You probably practice taught, got feedback from the person running the training. And in most cases, it's not a great experience. Even if you got quote unquote good feedback, that whole paradigm of even the person who's training you, they are perceiving you through the filter of their own experience in the world. And so for me, I don't even think that particular process is valid, with the rare exception of just sort of from a technical perspective, maybe a little bit about the cueing, maybe a little bit about the sequence. But generally speaking, all of this feedback yoga teachers get, in my opinion, just continues to build this idea up that I need to be dependent on what other people think of me when I'm teaching my class. So, this work to build a strong and confident mindset requires one on one coaching. It is hard, if not impossible, to change perspective on your own. I know you've heard that song, Taylor Swift, Antihero. It's me, me, I'm the problem, it's me, right? She's the problem. The whole concept of the song is I'm the problem, it's me. And this is exactly the sentence that captures it. You're the problem. And I'm just being frank with you here. I'm not softening it from a marketing perspective. I'm just being frank. You are the problem. The way you are looking at the world is the problem. Doesn't mean it's a problem that can't be changed. Doesn't mean you can't shift. It doesn't mean you can't grow. I mean, look at Michaela Schifrin. She had a mental block that blocked her from medaling in the last Olympics through 6 events. And she was able, with sports psychologists and a lot of personal work, to move past those inner demons, and she won gold. That is a testament to the changeability of the human spirit, of the mind. But it's impossible to change this kind of stuff on your own because you're in your own head. You're creating all these stories. So that's why the one-on-one coaching container is where these changes happen. Now, the other thing I want to speak to is a really common mindset problem that shows up for teachers where their feeling is like, I'm going in to teach this class and it's like do or die, right? It's like the bar is so high. There's so much riding on this, so much riding on whether or not this goes well and how they're going to. And this may resonate with you as well. That feeling of nervousness before you teach, that worrying about the class that you agreed to sub, even though it's like 4 days away, you already are worrying about it. Like the bar just seems so high. And when I talk to teachers who have this experience, this visceral experience, they'll say things to me like, I just need to get over it, or I just need to practice my sequence more, or I just need to, right? There's all this pushing energy. There's no allowing energy in any of this. It's all pushing. I'm pushing myself to just get over this. And when we try to push ourselves to get over something, we're not going to get over it. It's just going to continue to fester. This is again why you can't fix the problem on your own. It must be communicated and shared and worked through with another, well, really with a coach, right? The whole idea also of I'm not ready. I'm nervous. I'm not qualified enough. I don't have enough training. I haven't been teaching for 2 years. I took some time off and now I want to get back to it, but I don't feel confident enough. Like all these doubts connected to I'm not ready. And again, I want to reiterate if any of this or all of this is resonating with you, you need to know it's not just you. I over the many years of working with teachers, have coached teachers all over the world. And the really interesting thing to me is it doesn't matter if you're in Tokyo or Toledo. It doesn't matter if you're in Australia or Austin, Texas. Like teachers all are experiencing stuff like this. So again, zoom out and recognize it's an industry created problem because it's not talked about. And because teaching yoga is a human skill, a human experience, when you take a profession, yoga teaching, that has a certain profile of what is done when you teach classes, and you take human beings that have a tendency to overthink things, that have a tendency to fall into circles of self doubt, you create a soup where people's limiting beliefs are going to come to the surface. And when it's done in the context of an industry where most, if not all, of the training is get more hours, learn more stuff, memorize more information, no one's talking about the elephant in the room. This is the elephant in the room. So I'm bringing up this point emphatically to you because I want you to recognize it's not about you. Yes, it is about you if you're experiencing this, but it's not your fault. It's not something wrong or broken with you. It's not that you're too old to teach. It's not that you can't go back to teaching after you took a hiatus of a couple of years. It's not that you're too young. It's not that you're too inexperienced. It's not that you grew up thinking you were a wallflower, thinking you were too shy, or, whatever identity perception you have of yourself. Okay, so the first step is to give yourself a break. Recognize that you are human. Recognize that there is something in, as I described at the beginning, something about this amalgam of all the things we do when we walk in a room to teach this ancient practice that brings these things to the surface. But the really cool thing is when you are willing to talk about these things in an effort to, or in service to you becoming a more confident teacher with a stronger mindset, you will literally transform at the cellular level. You will literally transform as a person because you're going in to teach as a person. You're not going in as just the teacher part of you. You're bringing all your stuff. You're bringing all your hangups. You're bringing all your strengths. You're bringing all your weaknesses as you perceive them. So when you address these problems, you change at the cellular level. You shift as a person. That's why teaching yoga is one of the best personal development tools out there. And when you are willing to talk about this kind of stuff, you are making a huge investment in your growth as a human. And make no mistake about it, these kinds of mindset issues we're talking about, they cause health problems. They cause stress. I don't need to tell you if this is resonating with you that you have stress over your teaching yoga. And I just spent last week 20 hours over 4 days in a conference that was the application of yoga in the context of, it was really a medical yoga conference. So it was a yoga conference, but it was all through the lens of medicine. And every single presenter, whether it was about gut health, brain health, the gut microbiome, musculoskeletal issues, every single presenter in the medical field, the common thread for all the conditions they were talking about, all the disease scenarios they were talking about, clinical conditions, every single one, do you know what they all had in common? Stress. Stress was at was a root cause of just about everything. And if it wasn't at the root cause level, it was a contributor to proliferation, to exacerbation. So know that this kind of work changes you and impacts not only your ability to teach yoga confidently and joyfully, but it changes who you are as a person and probably adds years to your life. This is the kind of personal work that adds years to one's life because it takes away the stress that comes from having this, living with this kind of inner tension. So, as we're wrapping this one up, I want to give you just a couple of ideas here. I want you to notice for the next week, every time you teach a class, I want you to notice how you feel after teaching. Just ask yourself as you're driving home, how do I feel? I don't want you to think 1 second about how anybody else thought in your class, what they thought. I just want you to think about you. How do you feel? And I want you to document it on a Post-it note or a notebook or whatever. Do it in writing, don't do it on a computer, and don't do it in your phone. And I want you to track that for a week. And if you teach one class a week, I want you to do it for a couple of weeks so you have like at least 3 classes to use as a data set. And then after that experience of, let's say, 3 or 4 classes and you tracking how you feel, I want you to read what you wrote and then ask yourself, would it feel supportive to you to get help? Because that's always a choice you have. And it's not really about, are you ready? It's more about, would it feel supportive to you to get help? So we're coming to, or we are at, the end of this 4-part series. Like I said in the beginning, this is episode 4 of the 4-part series. And the whole point of this series was to lay out for you what really builds confidence in yoga teachers. And I hope I've done a good job of laying that out for you in the prior 3 episodes and this one. And as we come to the close of this 4th episode, if you find that you are at a place where you feel like you want to get help, it would be supportive for you to get help. I work with teachers in both a one-on-one program and it's not really a group program, but it's a more accelerated, shorter program. Sometimes teachers like to have a 3-month container for personal growth as a teacher, and sometimes teachers, for many different reasons, like to have more of a shorter, accelerated 30-day approach. So you can think of the 2 ways I can work with you as 90 days or a month, depending on what fits better in your mind. So I'm just going to leave that with you. As you're listening to this, if it would be supportive to you to get help, and I don't mean that in a wishy-washy way, I mean, and I don't even want to phrase it as if you're ready, because a lot of times people will think, oh, I'm not ready. So I just want you to stay at the level of, I'm sort of curious, I'm wondering, or maybe you're at the level where you listened to this last episode, or maybe even this was the only one, and you self-selected. You're like, absolutely, I am ready. Let's do it. You're speaking directly to me, and I want to fix these problems. I want to shift as a teacher. So I'm going to leave it with you that you've got a couple options. You can just send me a note on Instagram and just say, hey, listen to the episode. I'd like to find out more about what it would be like to work with you in your program. If you're curious about the 30-day accelerator program, the link is right on my website, barebonesyoga.com. And I'll include the link actually to both the shorter program and the 90-day program right in the show notes. So let's leave it like that. I'll leave both links there. And if it feels like it's a good fit for you, you can go ahead and enroll. Or if you have questions, you can reach out to me and I'm happy to help. So I hope you have found this series helpful. And, I do hear from a lot of yoga teachers, hey, I'm listening to your podcast. Actually, last week I had triple the number of downloads. And so I just want to say thank you. If you are a regular listener, thank you so much. If this is the first time you've landed here, I'm glad that we're connected. And I just want to thank you if you've ever been one of those people who've messaged me in any way to just say, "Hey, I'm listening to your podcast and I really enjoy it." I just want to thank you for sending me that note because I'm in kind of a vacuum here, just speaking to the screen. And it's always nice to hear from people that the messages are, helpful, that the content is helpful. So that's it. We're wrapping this one up. With the next episode, we'll start on a new theme. And between now and then, have a good week. And I'll talk to you next week on the next episode. Namaste. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If anything we talked about resonated with you, especially around anatomy, cueing, or feeling more confident when you teach, I want you to know that you are not alone. A lot of teachers tell me these are definitely challenges for them. As a thank you for being a podcast listener, I'm offering you $50 off my 4-week Yoga Anatomy Accelerator program. It's a short, focused program designed to help yoga teachers learn anatomy in an easy step by step way and how to apply it directly to their teaching. To get the podcast listener discount, you can head over to my Instagram and just send me a DM with the words podcast offer. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode.